Hello and welcome to Rocket iCluster, Introduction to Switching. So we're going to look at a few areas, but the first part is looking at introducing switching and some of the basic concepts, the preparation tasks that we need to look at, and the operations, and finally the simulator that's available. So the concepts really, we're talking about switching, which is a manual planned switch of a primary node to a backup node. The term that we see out there, role switch, is when we refer to changing the group or groups that we've got set up in replication to swap the roles of those groups or that single group that we want to run for switch test. We're not looking at failover specifically. That's where we've got a system failure of sorts. Here's an illustration of how the iCluster normally works with local journaling. We've got the production box, the primary going to the backup node, and we're using the staging store library. I'm sure we're all familiar with this. And of course, when we do the switch, we're going to swap the two systems over in place so that we eventually work with the backup, which is the new primary, and the swap of the production machine to be the backup. So we're looking at an opposite of what we saw on the first slide. So there are a whole series of steps that we would work with you. If we're doing services with you, there's a whole series of preparation steps. You can see some of them there. We also need to look at operations, because switching is not just about iCluster, it's all of the other associated tasks that are needed out there in other teams. And also there are conditions that we need to look at before we plan a role switch that we need to consider. And finally, we've got this thing called the role switch simulator, which is available in iCluster, and it allows us to simulate a switch on the backup, so we can get testers over there to test the environment to make sure everything is as we expect. Okay, so I've logged on to the two systems. The primary is the A, as we know, and the backup below B. Before I run the simulation, I'm going to just check everything is as I expect. So work with nodes shows me the nodes, of course, are active, and the metadata owner is the A box. If I then look at my groups with option 2 from the main menu, I can see my groups are all up and active, and the apply status is active. So any changes that are done on the A box are going across to the B. All of the groups, by the way, are replication groups. So then if I go to the cluster monitor, option 8 from the main menu, and I look at that, I can see that the latency on here is very low, which is what we want. I can see that all of the journaling is going on, and there's a little bit of one or two things happening. The most important thing is that I've got no suspended objects, and I've got no out of syncs at the moment. I have just run some sync checks to verify that this is the case, and you'll notice that the R column is showing that all my groups are ready for a switch. Okay, so I'm okay to run a simulation. Okay, so next step is to go to the backup node and run the simulator. And you always run it on the backup node. And the best thing to do is do a work with a submitted job. So if I do that here, prompt it, and then I'll run a dm start role swap switch, and then I prompt that from here. And so you can see that this is the command that I'm using here to run the simulator, and it asks me which groups I want to run the simulator on, and I can run simulator on one group or the whole set of groups on the backup. If I use the backup parameter there, the value there, and if I do have any known or existing suspended objects or out of syncs or journaling errors, I can say that I don't want that simulator to run if any of those exist. If you have known errors, you can go ahead and run it with. So I've got allow, no. If I just press enter,
that puts the defaults into that command, and then down here I'll just run that as I just run that, and I will hit enter and submit that to QBatch. And then if I come over here, if I look at this, if I look at my groups, what will start to happen is that the simulator will change the status here of these replication groups, and it will change it from active with the status apply. It will change that to a status of *RSS, which shows everybody that the simulation is running. There you go, I've done a refresh. So the simulation is running, and what's happening is, if I look at the monitor from this side, if I take the option 8, look at the monitor from here, press enter, what you'll see is that the apply on the backup has been halted. And so from this point on, we're going to see the latency figures increase, because we're basically allowing the production machine, on everybody on the production system, we're allowing them to continue working. They do not notice anything's changed. And what happens is, anything that is going on the production side, it is still being sent over to the backup machine, but it's going into the staging store for these groups. So the staging store is the holding area before it gets applied onto the libraries on the backup. But that process has actually been stopped, and the I signifies it's inactive, the apply process. On all of my groups, I have an I showing that the journaling is halted. Okay, so it will run through and eventually come back. We could check the job log, or we could check the event log, and we should see in the event log messages about the simulator successfully completing on each one of our groups. Okay.
Okay, so the roll switch simulator has been running about 10 minutes. More than it took about 5 minutes. But if I go into any of these groups on the backup machine, and I take an option 6 to look at the event log and do all on there, if I go down to the end of that, what I see in the event log is that each of these groups is shown to be successfully ready for the simulation testing. So if I look at that, all of my groups are ready, and it says at the very end there that the simulator on that node, the B node, is ready for testing. So what I would do, I'd get my users onto the B node, they would go into the application, and they would be testing, all of the options, navigating around, etc., running what they normally do to test it, including things like month end, weekend, and so on and so forth. So they go on testing, and what's happening over here on the production system, no change. There's the status of the fact that it's in the simulation mode, and the fact also is that anything that's happening on production is again being sent to the backup and not applied. So normally we recommend that a series of tests done with the simulator shouldn't be more than maybe a day max. Generally it can be even a few hours, because the longer you leave it running, the longer it takes to roll everything back, because we've taken a marked position before we run the simulator. So if I come out of here and I come back into do an F21 and I run another submit job, prompt that, and the way to end it is DM end RSS, and it's the same thing. I prompt it, and we've got two parameters here. Type of rollback is either object or fast. Fast is going to do it via library, and I always use the object because it's more thorough, shall we say. But the fast works in the same way, but it just doesn't do it at an object level. And then it says, if you've ended your simulator, do you want to run a sync check at the end of it? And you can do yes or no. If if I hit enter and I put in here db end, press enter, what I should see is the rollback will be running. This is still obviously happening here, and it will take its position from when we set up the simulator, and it will roll everything back to that position, and then it will start the replication up and bring across whatever's in the staging store libraries, bring it into and apply it to the the objects, the files on the backup. So that is the start and end of the simulator.
Hi, so here we are back on the test boxes, the A box, the primary, and the B box, the backup, and we are trying to replicate the what happens with a planned switchover. So obviously, apart from iCluster, there are a lot of other tasks that need to be done with network guys, operations, infrastructure, to make sure that everybody is all the users are off the system and it's all quiesced, i.e. we brought down the subsystems for the applications, and so nobody can get in there whilst we're doing a switch. And there's a lot of other steps. A lot of customers use something like a document called a runbook to follow the steps. There are other methods that you can follow, including some options in iCluster. So we're going to just do this with a method that I'm going to use using some commands. So on the primary box, what we need to do is make sure we go into the menu, cluster menu. We are checking the nodes that are all active, of course. Like here, both node A and B are active. The primary node is the metadata owner, as we see there. And if I look at the groups, and I should see that they're all up and running and active at this stage. And I would have, presumably, we would organise some sync checks just before we do this to make sure that that there are no suspended objects and no out of syncs. If we can possibly get to that, that's good. And all of our groups are showing that they are ready for a switch with this R column here. So if I look at that, everything's ready. So what we would do on the primary is we would come in here and we would start by assuming everything else is done from the iCluster point of view. We would start by ending all of the groups, and we can do that with a submit job, and it's dm end grp, prompt that. And we're going to do this switch for all groups on our nodes. As you can see, you can do it for specific group as well as all. So we're going to do all, hit enter. Just for convenience sake, I'm going to control end the groups, but with a slightly higher controlled time. Then I just put in here end group, submit that, and I just hit enter. And then what we see is it pops up with all of the monitoring jobs ending on the primary. And if I just press enter on that, and then I go to look through here on the monitor, of course I'm going to see the groups have all come down. There's no activity on the journals, there's no applies running. I make sure that everything is ended on the primary. I do a 94 from the main menu that shows me what's running in the iCluster subsystem, and what we want to see here is just the iCluster jobs and nothing for the groups. So if I just check that quickly, I can see all of those jobs that are running are primarily just for iCluster. None of the group jobs have been left up. I come back to the main menu, go to the nodes again, and what I'm going to do is just going to end my primary node. So I do that by a dm end node command, and I just press enter on there. I put in the name, I see DMO754A, which is the primary. I hit enter. I want to bring that down. If I refresh that now, we'll see that the communication between the two nodes has
stopped, it's become inactive, and automatically iCluster, because I've shut down the primary, it assigns the metadata owner to the backup box, which is what we want to see there. If I just get rid of that. So by ending that node, we're in a position to go over to the backup box, get onto the iCluster menu on the backup box, and what we want to do, obviously, is ensure here that none of the jobs are running on the groups that we've stopped. There shouldn't be anything running here, but it's always wise to check these things, so that looks good. And then the command that I use here is dm change role, and that command is going to change the metadata so that the primary becomes the B machine and the secondary, the backup, becomes the A. I just press an F4 prompt. I can do this again for a particular group if I want to switch on a particular group, or in my case I do it with an all for all groups. I just hit enter, leave the change object auditing to star yes, and then I just press enter, and that is going to run a series of jobs. It's like I say, it's going to change the metadata information for the groups so that the primary becomes the backup and so on. And also what will happen is it will start to run a series of jobs that are marking the position of each group. If I do a 94 now on this, I can see these jobs that are called primary. They're the ones that for each group we're marking up the journal position for that. And if I just refresh that, we'll see that those get run, they go through, and we want to make sure that they're all completed for each group. If I look on here, I come over to here, excuse me, and I do a 2 on there. What I look for on the groups is once I've got the primary, once I've got the mark position finished, I'm looking for the change in the groups. In fact, if I come over here, come out of that one, I do that 2 again just to refresh it, and you can see they've gone through and they are it's checking metadata information. It's also activating triggers on the new primary. Triggers and constraints get activated on this side. If I now do a 5 on one of these groups, you can see that the primary node is now marked up as the B, and the backup is the A. So we've done the actual switch at that stage. If I just come out of there, just do an F12. If I refresh it, I'm looking for all of the groups to be set to a status of inactive. I intentionally run the switch, and I don't want to start up the replication from the new primary to the new backup. I don't want to start that. I want to just be able to, in this particular example, once everything is ready, I want to be able to get test users onto the new primary to go through the application screens and the menus and go through and just do the test, follow the test plan that they would have had prepared for, after the switch is ready. We'd have to obviously start up subsystems again, get everything working from an application side before we got the users on. So all of those steps that I've mentioned would get highlighted. They would get detailed and put into my documentation for the whole switch. If I refresh that, see if it's finished on all of these groups, it looks like it has. So once they're all inactive, I can come out of here, and if I do a 4 for the event log on here, press enter, and if I do an F16, F18 to go to the end of that, I'm looking, I'll press that into again, I'm looking for the information in the event log, and it's going to show me that each one of these marked positions for each group is completed successfully. And I need to check all of that. I need to make sure that I've got everything switched correctly and it's all ready to use. And it should tell me at the end that the role switch for the new node is complete as well. If I refresh that, obviously it takes a while to get to all of this into the, but I'm looking for a message here that tells me that my B node is complete. Okay, that is the switch from the primary to the backup. The next part of the webinar will be the switch back.
So our B box is our primary. We've had the testers on that system. We've started everything up, obviously, subsystems, application, jobs, and everything, and they've been doing their testing for a determined period, following their test plan. When that has been completed and determined whether or not that integrity on that box is good, obviously we need to switch back on this whole exercise. We're not going to switch over and stay here. We're going to switch back after the testing's done. So we need to go through the steps to get everything ready on the with the system here, and then we go through the iCluster steps. So on the backup node, if I take the groups have not been started, by the way, I've said that before. We're not replicating as we've been testing to go from the B to the A to put that across, that change across. If I go into the nodes here on this this B box, this primary, you notice that the A box is inactive. So I need to just start that up, and then I've got the activity between the two. So and you'll notice that the iCluster owner is, as we've seen, the B box, the new primary. That's we've switched to. So the steps to now go back is to obviously isolate, make sure nobody can do anything on this B box, and we've kicked all the users off. We go to the primary system, and over here, once we've logged into iCluster, we obviously want to check one or two things. First of all, we check the state of the nodes. We can see at this stage, as we've seen on the backup side, the B box, which is still the primary, is the metadata owner. So what we want to do at this stage is we want to make sure that we can have the primary that we've changed. We want to make that the metadata owner. To do that on this on this green box, on the A box, we just do the dm set master command. You can run that anytime, and that would just change the owner over from the A to B. If I just hit that, press that, and do a refresh, we can see now A is the metadata owner. And from this side, from this node, I'm going to run the command again to change the roles. Again, don't forget that's going to do the group definitions. If I take that, press enter, F4 on that, sorry, and I'm going to do all groups again. I'll just press enter on that. The same on the object auditing, do a yes, and I've just taken the defaults there. And then it's going to run through each one of those groups, and it's going to allocate the new primary back to the A box, and the backup will be the B box again. So that's going through that process. If I check on this side, if I take a look at the groups, I can see again that we're doing a mark position from the V box, and we are bringing the triggers down here and the constraints, and we're going to do the start of triggers and activate triggers and constraints over on this box, and therefore it's the same process where it goes through and runs these prim pre. So if I come out of here and do a 94 to look at the iCluster subsystem, what we should be seeing again for each group, the mark position on the group, the prim pre job. Again, we need to wait. We need to wait and make sure that they all terminate correctly. It's going to take a while. Up on my systems, as I said, it's taking something in the region of 5 minutes or just under to do that all the groups. I don't know the exact time, but you can see I need to make sure that that is all completed. And also looking at the groups here, again with the display option on the group, if I take the 5, we can see that the metadata has been changed and the primary is back with the A box. Okay, so I then need to be patient for that to finish. If I refresh on that, that's a mark position on that slightly larger group. The other thing I can look at, of course, is the event log for
and I just put a selection in there, and then I go to the end. Again, I'm looking for the information about the switch being successful, and it's taking a while because it's doing stuff, but you can see that the message is coming out here. Start positions are completing, the role switch for the groups is happening, and if I go back, I should see all my systems are successfully being switched. Some of the bigger ones take a bit longer, obviously, and if you've got a large group with a lot of database files in there, for example, that could take quite a bit more time than you're seeing here. It says the role switch. Okay, so I mean, I'm looking at that, and then I'm basically saying once that is all complete, I can then start the groups up. I've got inactive on the status of all of the groups. I can then run the job to start up each one of my groups, and whether you got that through a manual process or whether you got it through like a program to run, then you would run those, you would start those groups up, and obviously you would be running sync checks on all those groups to check. You can see nothing running. You would run the sync check on all of those groups after the switch to make sure, obviously, that everything is in sync. And if you've got any suspended objects or any out of sync objects, you would need to investigate and activate those. So that is a complete webinar on switching, how you prepare for it, how you run the simulator, and how you run the switch and switch back on your systems. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video. To access more great videos like this one, please join us at the forum at rocket.connectedcommunity.org. Thank you.